Everyone, to the November board meeting of IgniteCDA. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please, and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Olivia, will you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now is the time for public comment. Do we have any public comment? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of both the last board meeting and the city council workshop we had, joint meeting.
I will move to approve the October 19th, 2016 board meeting minutes.
Second. Moved and second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have a presentation.
You want to do the? We have to do
Special workshop.
second minutes.
Oh, I thought you did. I asked for both.
Sorry.
Okay.
I did one. I didn't really
The
get the other
joint
ones
city
reviewed.
council meeting we had.
Yeah, I'll move to approve the minutes of the October 28, 2016 City Council Workshop minutes.
Second?
Thanks. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, we'll have the presentation from the Four Corners Master Plan. Bill Greenwood and Phil Boyd.
Thank you for your time today. I have a few slides for you to look at, but what we're looking at today, we want to discuss your interest in a potential land trade in this area, and also discuss your interest in funding within these component or these companion projects to our shared parking lot. So this is the original BLM master plan that went to them for the agreement for our lease. And with the shared parking that came before us and with the county that goes about in here, all of these elements have kind of shifted around a little bit. They're still here, they just have moved around on the puzzle board a little bit. And your property is this big triangle, and we'll be talking about this little triangle here with the next slide. You are interested in expanding your 7 lots into 10 lots. This is the right-of-way for garden. It's about 100 feet. And the real impact to the park is this item 10 here. I presented this to the Park and Rec Commission the other evening, and they like this idea. This really helps us with the next slide. You'll see how the layout is kind of the hub of this whole area and all of the other elements around here. I'm going to be speaking with the representative that Kathy Muir for Land and Water Conservation from the state about adjusting our boundary to exclude this area. And I don't see them having any resistance about giving up this piece, because this blue one does fall within that existing boundary. That existing boundary runs right along this easement here. And so we'll have to do a conversion in that, and I believe we'll do real well with that. We're seeing a net gain in parkland here of 10,000 square plus. So there shouldn't be any issue with them seeing this exchange. And this one is what we've done to break out each component, and we've numbered them, and so it's easier to identify what we're doing with funding. And I'll just go through them one at a time. The plaza and restroom areas is item number 1, is here. We believe that cost will be about $430,000. We're going to look for Land and Water, a grant to help with that. And in doing that, it's a 50% match. Item 2 are the pickleball and futsal courts that are here. I'm meeting with Chris Martin with NIC on Friday. He is working on the conversion for their tennis courts to give us that money from the federal government to help build these courts. We guessed that it might be $202,000. I suspect that conversion is going to be greater than that number, but I don't know that for certain. I'll know on Friday. The open space and warm-up is Area 3, which is here, and just what it is, it's just a green space and its ability for the ball field to, the folks that are using it to come out here and warm up. And that number for that has to do mostly with just re-landscaping and irrigation. And we'll have to be careful. Some of this irrigation that's in here feeds some of the new piece on the new Fort Ground Drive. So we'll have to keep some of this active. We can cut it and reconnect it, but we've tied into some meters and valves that are right in this area. We'll have to be careful with that. And that is $234,000. The next item is the skate park. The skate park, as you recall, was a kind of a little dog leg that went around your triangle piece down this direction. It was about 30,000 square feet. We have about 30,000 square feet, but this is phase one, 15,000 square feet. We're going to submit a grant for a $400,000 to the state for a match. So our portion of that would be $200,000. This other piece over here, I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, but just because we're talking about the skate park, this was always going to be green space, so that if they were able to do phase two on a skate park, it's easily done. We can just remove the irrigation and extend that skate park. And, well, I guess that's item 6. So what we came up with here recently, Monty McCulley, our trail coordinator, was talking to me about what they call a pump track. And a pump track can be just dirt or it can be asphalt on top of dirt, and it's a type of, like our BMX track, if you're familiar with what that looks like. Instead of being pedaled, you actually run the curves and the slopes, and through inertia, you're just running through this without pedaling it. It's becoming really popular. There's a contingency of people around here that are doing it now. And we thought that would be a good solution where we would maybe bring in some irrigation around the perimeter, plant some trees, and then this user group, just like the BMX folks, would help us build it, and they would do it with in-kind. We're going to strip off a lot of soil here, and so we'll have plenty of it, and it would cost less to do this than having a big piece of grass that we're going to have to irrigate and maintain. We would have some irrigation that would be drip that would have trees around this, and it would buffer it and soften the whole area. If, in fact, the skate park ever was able to find funding again to go to phase 2, we could talk about that, or this becomes a whole new user group like it was when we didn't have a BMX track some years back. That's extremely popular now. So that's a new feature that we've never thought about before. The mayor is happy about the idea of futsal courts. I've looked into those. We could do those in conjunction. It'd have to be a fence with pickleball courts. They are, as an average, they range. A football court can be on a hard surface. The soccer ball itself is a little heavier. It doesn't bounce as much. And so you can play it on a hard surface so the ball doesn't get away from you. It's played usually 3-on-3. They played it before on a basketball court size. These can be, let's see, the length is about 40 yards by 20 yards for a court. And they're played sometimes off the walls, and sometimes they're played with a line. So they're very malleable in how you put them together. But there are some folks that are interested in that. In that building of that, we could, and I asked the state about this, with the tennis court funding that's coming from NIC, does it have to be tennis courts? And it can be sports courts. So these two types of activities would apply. All you would have to do in this would have to build a fence between the two so the soccer balls don't go into the pickleball area. So on the page that I'm going to show you next, I left this one up so I could talk to it, but we sent to all of you the breakdown spreadsheet. We added some other items in case these elements, these features, come in under budget. What I just described to you, we come out to just a little over $1 million. The line 8 and 9 in the sheets that I gave you previously are add alternates. we think that we can come in on come up short on some of this stuff as far as what it's going to cost us. For example, when Phil and I talked about this, we had a number in here for a playground to be installed by the contractor, and it was quite, I guess, grand. We have on our staff 3 safety playground technicians, and we would install a playground, a $50,000 to $70,000 playground that we would buy off the shelf that would be really nice and install it ourselves and save, I think the number was about $150,000 by doing that. So there's some other things we can do creative in here that we might, when the bids come in, we might be able to do these other items that are listed. And then the other night I ran into Scott, and he was saying that he was always liked the awning element that was shown some time back on the face of Memorial Field. That wasn't part of that, but I bring it up just because Scott and I spoke the other evening about it. And I threw it in there so you could remember what it was. So if the money went further than we had hoped, we might be able even to throw this into the mix. And this has always been a really popular feature. Everybody thought this was a nice element to attach to and it doesn't attach to the building itself. It's standalone. So structural integrity of Memorial wouldn't be impacted at all. Any questions?
Danny?
Mr. Chairman, so Bill, back to the original Four Corners plan, looks like you had a soccer field in there, that's come out in return.
Yes, thank you. So the realignment of this, when we put in the parking lot, it kind of touches that a little bit. So what we've done in this plan, we had about 25 or 30 feet. So we were able to pull that back a little bit and get more distance here, but you're correct. We don't have a soccer field, and we did not do the realignment.
Okay. So that kind of leaves the only sort of larger scale organized activity would be on the softball field itself, as opposed to having a soccer match, for instance.
Correct.
And I'm thinking about noise and activity close to a neighborhood.
And we spoke with the HOA about the noise, and we're going to have some discussions with NIC about getting better about the music that they're playing. That's really their biggest complaint, not so much the crowd and the cheer and the crack of the bat. They were more anxious about just the overall, the music aspect of it, not so much the crowd.
Okay. Well, on the same point, so then to the new slide, so for the skateboard park up there and
Yes.
the possible, what's it called, a pump course?
A pump track right here. So it's dirt, and it's just mounds of dirt that have curves and banks that you just ride around on it just with it, like I said, you sort of coast through it.
Okay. So, and then you're showing a lot of vegetative land buffer, I think, in that red quadrant.
Right.
That's in the budget, right? I mean,
Correct.
I know there's some trees, there's some vegetation there, but...
We would try and salvage as much as that as we can. I'd like to use it. The thing that's going to dictate being able to utilize that, we've talked about a berm through here, and that's the biggest challenge with the trees. Not that they're in the way, but when we start moving soil around and grit the berm that we're looking for, maybe we don't berm up as much, but that's where we're going to start covering roots, and then there'll be some tree failure.
Okay. Because all this is pretty active park use, and so I just think it's important to keep that activity separate and noise buffered from the rest of our lots.
And that's our intention with the berm and the extra foliage being planted in it as a noise buffer.
That's all.
Thanks, further questions. Brad?
You know, along that line, I mean, if you can't berm without losing all those mature trees, it might be worth putting some kind of a masonry wall in there or something to hold the value of those lots.
Brad, we talked about that a little bit. Where concern was it might become a kind of a graffiti wall, and so we were trying to look for something more
Yeah.
organic.
Yeah, it's too bad there's graffiti. Well, anyway,
And we could still consider it. I'm not saying that we wouldn't. I'd like to save as many of those trees as we can.
yeah, I guess that's kind of a work in process. Hey, also on Memorial Field, so is that also going to be baseball or just softball, or can it be baseball?
It's just softball.
Yeah, and there's not enough room, like if the opportunity ever arose for a baseball team or something, with that green space on the other end of it there, that could turn into a baseball field.
So you're thinking like the fence line would be extended out here further to get the distance from home plate to outfield?
Yeah, and I don't know if that's enough distance or not, and I'm not saying it has to be now. I'm just saying sometime in the future, if there was, it was upgraded and there was a need for a baseball park, is there the room that could be pushed out there into that green space sometime?
Okay. We have a pretty good field that's being used by a few different user groups
Yeah.
at Dorco.
Yeah, I just wondered. I don't know what the distance is there.
Any other questions?
Bill, going back to Memorial Field, is there going to be any money spent on the grandstand area, restrooms, all that that's currently there? It's starting to look a little bit of disrepair, considering the carousel's now in. Looks like we need to have something kind of upgraded there too.
We have not looked at it because we understand the cost is going to be quite a bit more than what we're suggesting here today for our request. It's going to be a lot, and we haven't done any structural work on it, so we'll have to look at what it's going to take engineering-wise to get everything inside up to snuff. And then there was some discussion about another concession stand under there and some restroom facilities and maybe even some storage. But I don't think you've ever been underneath there. It's need some help. So I don't know, and we haven't done any preliminary guesses on what that would cost.
Can it be saved?
We hope so. We would
I
love
mean,
to.
if it's starting to be in disrepair now, you'd think you'd want to put money into it now before it gets too
far along.
gone. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. But I'll have to look at what those numbers might be. We've been kind of keeping it at a hand's distance because we're thinking the number's going to be really, really high.
Thanks.
Follow-up question on that, if I could, Mr. Chair. So with the awning piece, would that include improving the skin on the backside of the field? Because it's pretty rough.
Not in that number, Denny, that we showed you for that 150, no. But I had budgeted this year to have the outside painted again, and all of those pieces would be removed, and the element.
Bill, can I get you on the mic?
Sorry.
I knew he was going to get in trouble.
So that element of that awning would stand off of it, but I was going to paint the face, just give it a little bit of lipstick.
It's so rough that I'd hate to see you put a lot of money on a facade standing in front of it when you're looking at that really rough background.
Right. Well, the
Not
memorial
structural,
lettering
but
that's there now would have to be removed because you see in that one, it's this all moves. So these would come off and be repainted, and as you see, the memorial field lettering there is now, so it would be up here. So this whole, we'd have to do something with it. You're absolutely right. If there was money found to do this element.
Brad?
Yeah, Memorial Field was one of my other questions on that. I mean, I've heard that the grandstand is structurally sound, but I've heard that that's not for sure. So, and now it's sounding like less for sure, talking to you. And I think it's historic, and it's a gorgeous-looking old ballpark there. But I mean, is it fixable, or is it true that it's structurally sound and it can be saved and last long term?
So
Or is
anything can be done with enough money.
Well, I'm just trying to find out the answer.
I'm trying to answer your question too. I'm not. Honestly, because we've talked to different engineers, and one engineer can say that it is not structurally sound because it's not feasible to save it. Well, feasible has to do with dollars, and so another engineer will say, yeah, it can be done, but it's going to cost you this much money, and we have not really, gone into that conversation very deeply yet.
Well, I think Memorial Field is great.
I do too.
And maybe, I don't know if the other members here have the same concerns I do, but I'd really like to find out how structurally sound is it, and what could we do while this organization is still in force here, while we still have the Urban Renewal District here. What can we do if it needs to be shored up and have some structural work done to make it good for another, 30, 40 years or whatever, and add the life to it? Or is the final outcome going to be that it really isn't structurally sound, and we're putting good money after bad, and we need to think about rebuilding it and build a new one that looks like the old one or something like that. I'm hoping it's savable, because that'd be a lot cheaper than trying to build a new one, but I think it would sure be good to know what the final answer is, because we've heard different answers over the years. You know, then we know what to do. Do we do a little fix-up on it and put this awning on it and do that? Or, I mean, does it have big problems that we've got to talk about?
Well, the beauty of the awning is that it's a standalone piece. And so if we were put it there before anything was done structurally, it wouldn't impede that work.
Well, that's good, but I think still, if we got to get some engineers to look at, I still think before we do that, even if it's structurally separate, I'd personally, I don't know what the others think, I'd personally really just like to know what the final say is, because we've heard different things over the years. Is it really structurally, you know, can it really be saved with some investment put into it, or is it a lost cause? You know, and it's going to hold up for a few years, but it's basically on its last legs and it's pretty much had it. Or is it something that's substantial enough that if it had, you know, some whatever work done on the foundation or the structure or whatever, that it could be good for several more generations again. So it'd really be nice to know the actual answer, get a consensus on that from my standpoint anyway. So while the urban renewal district is here and we have all these things going on with these improvements, we could look at this logically and make a decision on if we should put some investment into that, into shoring it up and making it structurally sound, or if it's, like I said, if it's on its last legs and it's not possible to save it. You know, or
Bill, what would it take to come up with that answer?
Yeah. Or do we need to hire some engineers to look at it?
I happen to know an engineer that might be able to do the work. So, yeah, if you are interested in that, absolutely. I'll get busy and see what we can find out.
Okay, thanks.
I'd sure like to know. I mean, how does everyone else feel?
I think it makes sense, Brad, especially with that. I'm a fan of Memorial Field. I'd love to see it saved, but the infrastructure investment that we're looking at spending collectively as a city around this right now, are we designing everything around something that isn't going to be there?
Right.
And that doesn't make any sense for anybody. So I think it's a valid question.
Well, something I'm thinking about, if we put that new facade on there for $175,000, but the building then has to be torn down and rebuilt, that facade may not fit in the new. It could be designed around that, but maybe it would be better if it's not there.
Right. That's my concern.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I want to do it right. And I think the concept of what's going on here is great.
Yeah, Del Hatch came up with that just real quick because we were doing the work on the four corners on the Mullen realignment, and we're looking at that building, and it's like we have this beautiful plaza and this carousel is going in, and all of a sudden he said, you know, we need to do something with that. And he's such an artist, he just kind of just popped that out real quick and had it ready in a very short time. And it looks great.
I don't know if you can call Memorial Field one of the jewels in town, but it is kind of a jewel. It's something that's really important to the community, and there's a lot of history there. So I don't know if you need funding to have an engineer look at it or whatever, but I'd really like to.
I will see what I can do and get some numbers.
I think this is the time to see what we've got there.
Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do know that we've talked about this at council before, and the council is very supportive on keeping the original Memorial Field, and I believe that's the direction that they would like to take, is to do whatever it takes to, within reason, to restore that.
Okay.
We'd need board approval, though, to spend some money for engineering, but you can bring us a quote back, and we can then talk about that at that time.
Okay, so the next time that you meet, hopefully I'll have some numbers and I can present those to you.
Thank you,
That
sir.
would be great. Thanks.
Any other questions? So, Tony, then what's the next step on this, or Bill?
Well, what I was hoping for was this request from the 1 through 7 to come up to that, just shy of that $1 million base bid.
Can you go to slide 4, please?
Yeah.
Yes. This one?
No,
Next one.
the next one. That one, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just to get us started, I'll move that we approve in concept this budget request, subject to final detail, some final approval.
Second.
And that's the budget request of without the add
items
alternates?
items 1 through 7.
Okay. $1,019,100.
Correct.
And I had a second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Just if I
Approved
could
in
just
concept?
In
Yeah.
concept, right.
So
Well,
to
we-
approve in concept funding items 1 through 7 as presented. Is that what, okay.
Right. I guess my sense is that we come back with a little bit more detail once it goes to the council and the council decides to approve it.
There's quite a few steps that'll have to happen to approve the land swap, and
Right.
that all has to be.
So that's a separate request for tonight.
Right, so you had two before you today, is one about the funding for these companion projects, and the other was your interest in this land trade.
Mr. Chairman, okay, and I'm fine with approving this in concept, and it'd be nice to kind of know the whole package, I think, and as far as what's the outcome of Memorial Field Stadium and some of these other things before we do the final, in case we had to make some tough choices and do some adding or deducting, and make some priorities on it, but I'm fine with doing it in concept.
So what do we need to know to sort of do the same thing with the land exchange? Are there any questions out there we need to have answered before we make the same sort of statement about trading dirt? Because I think we're ready to kind of do the same thing with that. I'd make the same motion.
If you entertain the land, I've talked with planners, so we need to do some stuff with them. I need to talk to the representatives for LCD, or Land and Water Conservation Fund, tomorrow. So the question to your board today is, are you interested in this? And if you are, those are the next steps to go through. And if you're interested in it, we need to get approval from council as well.
So I'd move that we express an interest in the land trade and direct our executive director to work with Bill on the details of that and bring us back a final proposal.
Second.
Moved in second. Further discussion? And that's per the drawings.
Yeah, so we're basically going to swap the western terminus of the Garden Avenue right-of-way plus some additional parkland for that small triangle east of our lots.
So these three plots will have to be platted, these lots will be platted.
Correct.
And then I will work with Land and Water to readjust these boundaries, and then work with them on this piece that is being traded for that, and demonstrate we're getting a gain in parkland.
So then the second motion then will give you the walking papers you need to do that? And does that have to go
I'm sorry.
to City Council then? So this second motion that we're about ready to approve, then this will give you the necessary tools you'll need to go forward then and get all those other approvals,
Right.
and then it needs to go to the City Council?
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks.
Thank you so much
Very
for your
much.
time.
Committee reports. Finance Committee.
Fairly quiet month for the month of October. The Lake District did experience a $4,423 increase in assets from the month of September. No major receivables for the month. Other current assets, Magnus McHugh's 2015 audit adjusted to equal out the payroll. Tony, you're going to talk a bit about that, aren't you? About the payroll adjustment between the River District and Lake District? Okay. There's just an adjustment between payroll a number of years back got taken out of one district, and now it needs to be balanced. Fixed assets, no big changes there. Other assets, Washington Trust Bond had an interest of $89. The 609 Sherman Lofts IRA had a value decrease of $8,107 per Magnuson McHugh adjustment once again. Liabilities and fund balance, mortgage and notes payable, the line decrease of $6,031 for October represents a normal month of debt obligation payments. 609 Sherman Lofts, once again, due to the adjustment we'll talk about in a minute. And all other liabilities were either unchanged or normal for the month, including the 2% due to the arts that we do every month. From the Lake District P&L, Lake District received $15,818 in tax increment from the county for the month of October. Other than that, there was really dues and sponsorship line item reflects a 50% of the 2017 year contract for Jobs Plus, and all other P&L line items were normal for the month. For the River District experienced a $35,947 decrease in cash assets from September month end, due primarily to professional service costs related to the Salties Way project design. Liabilities and fund balance were once again pretty much unchanged other than the 2015 audit adjustment. And all other items were basically the same, including the 2% credit due to the arts. The River District P&L, River District experienced a $4,317 in tax increment revenue from the county. Professional fees line item contains a $38,250 paid for the Salties Way project design efforts, and all other items were basically the same. Tony, do you want to just touch on the transfer of funds from the River District to the Lake District?
Yes,
Up in the
so
audit?
this is a kind of a small non-material adjustment that's been ongoing with Magnuson McHugh since 2013. Prior to 2013, the split between reimbursement of administrative funds between the two districts was not appropriately accounted for. So there's a $65,532 fee owed from the River District to the Lake District to settle up that split between the administrative costs. Our accountant recommends that we just go ahead and approve that and just cut a check from the River District to the Lake District, internal cash transfer to kind of settle this adjustment so it goes away.
That way we won't have to continue carrying it each year over through each audit. So that was a recommendation of the Finance Committee that we do that. Any questions on that?
That makes sense.
Payables? We had payables on?
Yes,
Payables this month, not as big as some of the months we've had, but still a decent amount. Elam and Burke was $219.95 for legal counsel. Holly Troxel was $2,384 for legal counsel. That was broken out to $1,332 for general counsel on legislative issues and also public records request of $270. $1,052 of that was for Lake Urban Renewal District Midtown Theater Initiative and also the Lake Apartments Project. So for a total of $2,384. The Redevelopment Association of Idaho, our 2017 membership fees were for $850. The Washington Trust Bank Lake District Note Series 2016 legal costs were $18,916.39, split between Holly Troxel, Elam and Burke, and Workland and Weatherspoon. And last but not least, Salties Way Road Construction Project. This is the start of the design for that project, $12,750 for Welsh-Comer Engineers. So a total of $35,120.34 for the month of October. Any questions?
Mick, just one, or Tony, and that note series refinancing on the legal costs is split with the city, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just to comment that, that's not insignificant transactional cost.
no, that was not split.
That one's all of ours.
That was our cost. We split the annexation.
The total,
Gotcha.
you're right.
Even with that, we've saved $500,000 on that refinance, so it's all relative.
And as Danielle pointed out to me, that the refunding of this note was about half of what it cost due to the 2011 issuance. So it was fairly inexpensive to refund it with Washington Trust Bank.
It would have taken more documentation and more time had you not gone with Washington Trust
Right.
again. So it's good their rate was the best.
Right.
Good point. Anything else for Mr. Arman?
Just need a motion to.
Motion?
To approve the financials and payables?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Arman. Housing. Deanna.
Pardon?
Housing. You have a housing
Oh,
committee
I'm
report?
sorry. I was just looking at these numbers. There's no report.
Mr. Jordan, Parking Committee.
All right, the revenue on the downtown lots is getting close to what it used to be before the McEwen project, McEwen Park project. I can bring you some updated numbers on a spreadsheet at the next meeting next month on that, but that's getting better. They're doing some evaluating on whether to start charging for the spaces or put some kind of limits on the free time you can park on the spaces around the city hall. The ones all around the city hall in the kind of the southeast and the lower lot around the city hall, they haven't been charging for it, but some people are starting to abuse that and leave cars there and for long periods of time and so forth. So they're analyzing that. And the booting program and this is for people who haven't paid their parking tickets and they've accumulated probably 4 or more tickets and refused to pay their tickets. That's moving forward, and it'll be going before the city council. They're working right now on looking at who they'd probably possibly contract with Diamond and a towing company. So that's moving ahead. They've talked about some license plate recognition software. Right now, the little enforcement vehicle goes along and he has to chalk all the cars, and then sometimes people move the car one space or move it back up or wipe the chalk off and so forth. So the new thing is this license plate recognition software, and you can get you can tell where every car is and if it's been moved, and it's easier for enforcement and so forth. That runs $45,000 to $88,000. Diamond says that they're using a program over in Seattle, and it's the $45,000 version, and they've had pretty good luck with it. So there's nothing immediate on that, but they're looking at that. And also, there's $8,000 budgeted for new and more and enhanced parking signage to clarify parking and where to park and not to park and the times and so forth. And that's going to be coming up this spring.
Deanna.
Brad, I have a couple questions.
Hope I can answer them.
People that are, quote unquote, abusing the parking over beside City Hall, what type of abuse is that?
Yeah, well, it's just a combination of things. You've got vehicles being left for a long time there, not just for a few hours, but there's no charge for parking. So you've got possibly some of the residents downtown, they're just leaving cars, parked there kind of like their own spot.
So we don't do a 24-hour parking. So people are leaving them for 2 or 3 days. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's been some long-term like that. And then there's the usual thing where you get a car that parks in a boat trailer space or a boat trailer that takes 2 spaces. That's a little bit separate issue. But anyway, they're debating if it's time. It's nothing immediate yet, but they're studying whether it's time maybe to start, limiting the free parking there to so long, or start charging from a certain time.
Just my personal opinion,
Pardon me?
at some point in time, we need to have free parking for people.
Free parking.
And it is a distance to walk. So I would certainly think that, if people are abusing it and leaving cars overnight and that kind of thing, then easily we could track that and ticket them.
Mm-hmm.
And put some signs up, no 24-hour parking, but I would certainly like to see us allow some free parking in our community. Otherwise, what you do is just drive people more and more into the neighborhoods.
I understand that.
And then the neighborhoods just, they can never park in front of their house because people are parking there to work all day and so on. I think it's not conducive to making the neighborhoods any better. I know when we changed the parking downtown, all of a sudden everything north of Sherman up into Fifth and Walnut and some of those they've got all day parking now, people parking there while they go to work because they aren't willing to pay. They're willing to walk, but they're not willing to pay.
Right.
So I would certainly like to see you pass that on to the Parking Commission, that maybe we can analyze it a little bit, and if people are really abusing it, leaving cars there for a long period of time, we could ticket them or put some signs up, no 24-hour parking or anything like that. But I do think it's important to have some place where people can park that maybe can't financially figure out how to pay for parking. They'll just go into the neighborhoods.
I'll relay that.
Anything else for Brad in parking? Thank you. Mr. Burns, Communications
No
Committee.
report to share, Mr. Chairman.
And Commissioner Widmeyer.
Nothing to
Jobs.
report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next is the Executive Director's report.
I'd like to just move my report just around a little bit. I have Matt Gillis here, who's so nicely come to join us here in the late afternoon just to kind of give us an update on the Celtice Way design effort.
Sure. I'm not sure if this is on, but I assume it is. So the last time we met, we were in the throes of our renewed effort to re-engage the public. And we did that by meeting with several groups, giving presentations, and it kind of culminated with a very well-attended public meeting at the ICE Arena. It was great. We got great feedback. We were able to take that information, do some additional analysis on some specific project issues, and take that to the City Council to finally get some concrete design direction on some bicycle-related stuff. So we got direction from the council 3 weeks ago, maybe, and since then we've lowered our shoulder and we're in design mode right now. One of the primary things that may have changed since I showed this group the concept is the decision to design and construct two-lane roundabouts at both Celtice and Atlas, that intersection, and Celtice and Grand Mill. We had overwhelming support for the one we had at Atlas. We hadn't even thought of the one at Grand Mill yet. We had great support for that at the public meeting, and so that's really gained some momentum. And all of our analysis is showing that it's going to perform in a superior manner, it's going to be safer, and the public supports it. So that's going well. We're meeting with city staff continually, but we have a every 2-week meeting where we're getting a lot of questions answered, bringing everybody in to give their input so we can keep this moving. Because again, the goal is to build this thing next spring, summer, and fall. And it'll be at a minimum, it'll be a full construction year. And it will likely spill into maybe 2018. But we're hopeful we can get it done in 2017. You're probably wondering about cost. From a cost standpoint, we are still working through it. Remember, we just got the direction, so we've got to get enough of the design done to get a good cost estimate to bring back to the city. And I hope to have that in about 3 weeks. Can I answer any questions?
Questions?
Mr. Chair, Matt, the equipment at Grand Mill, the
Signal equipment?
signal light, that's fairly costly, right? That's spendy equipment there.
It is.
Is a possibility to recycle that somewhere else in the city?
Yes, the city's done that in the past, where they've harvested other signals that have changed for whatever reason and then used them in other locations.
Ballpark, what's the value of those?
Well, the original construction value is probably in the $150,000, $175,000 range.
So it's a pretty good asset.
It is, yeah. You wouldn't want to scrap it.
Right.
Definitely want to use it. And we can arrange to have that delivered to wherever the city would like. We can work that out with Tim.
Other questions for Matt? I was at the city council meeting that you presented, and the demonstration they had for the 2-lane roundabouts was pretty interesting. There was quite a bit of support and stuff for that, so that's neat.
Good, yeah, it'll be new for everybody, but I think it'll be the right solution.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Matt. So now I'll go back up to my number A under my report, the Collaborate project. So what I'll do is I'll go to the podium and kind of show on the screen, kind of get everybody a summary back, kind of up to date where we are on this project to kind of lead into the discussion. So you bear with me. I won't go through the entire presentation. I'll just kind of pick a few slides out to kind of refresh everybody's memory on the project. This is a footprint for the Collaborate Fairfield Inn project up on Northwest Boulevard. Right here, this is the old Garden Motel area. So if I back up one, you'll kind of see in this little graphic here kind of how that area is going to be delineated in the project. The hotel will be on the back part of the parcel, and you'll have 2 development pads on Northwest Boulevard. There's a photo of what the Fairfield Inn would look like. This is the funding request to IgniteCDA. The funding request is $1,255,000, broken out in several categories, including existing property cleanup, totaling $398,000, Emma Avenue improvements, totaling $521,000, Davidson Avenue improvements totaling $221,000, and landscape right-of-way improvements totaling $115,000. And I'll come back to this slide. As you can see, the project budget, total cost is $15 million, and you kind of see the capital stack about how this project will be financed at $15 million, including the tax increment financing from IgniteCDA of $1,255,000. And just to refresh your memory about how that money would be reimbursed to the developer, we have the assessed values of $22 million, the current land value of $2 million, which kind of yields that $20 million increment boost to the project area, which when you equate out, theoretically could generate a tax increment financing of $1,260,000. So that was a proposal made to the board last month. I'll leave this up as a request to the board to facilitate discussion.
Discussion.
Mr. Chair, Tony, if we go back, and I know you're not up there to go back to the slide, but if you go back to the slide, the project that we're working on now or looking at is just the $15 million portion, correct? So if we go back.
I'm not sure which
That
way
picture?
I'm going here.
Maybe it's the other way.
The other way?
Yeah.
One more.
One more, yeah. So the project that we're looking at right now is $15 million. I think last time we talked about that seemed rather high, that number, considering when we look at all the assessed values of the other hotels in there. And we're not looking at right now the $7 million restaurant retail. That's not in this project that we're looking at right now. So should we be looking at, when we're doing this calculation, should we be looking at $22 million, or how comfortable are we in looking at what number that should be? That would be my question.
We do have Mr. Ayers in the audience. If he would like to address any of these questions, I'll leave that up to the board to invite him to address
Tony,
these.
I'd just like to do a follow-up on what Steve's question there is that if in fact we're looking only at the $15 million and we're looking at the assuming opening of July 2017, which is, 7 months from now? The other $7 million is probably not going to be completed at that same point in time, correct? So we're really looking at a portion of the $22 million opening sometime in 2017. And I don't know construction that well, but it seems like 7 months is a pretty quick turnaround. considering winters about to form us. So if you've got, yeah, you sure have answer some questions.
You can go up there and use your presentation.
The developments on the front part, the pads, are due to, we have an active market. We are actively working on projects, deals for that. And so without disclosing who and what those encompass, it's a little bit hard for me to talk about and make public knowledge about someone who I may be competing with. And so, but those are actively being worked on development-wise. The timing, it could be in line with the hotel. It might be a little bit later.
So
one of them specifically probably will be in line with the hotel.
How comfortable are you with July?
Depending on how we do tonight, it's close, it's tight. Weather, we're ready to go, but weather is a factor. If we have a rough winter, there's a lot of snow, rain, which it feels like it could be, given what we've been through for the last couple of months. But it's about 8 months, and so I think it's right in there.
I guess, Ron, another question I have, is there an appraisal that supports that $15 million value?
Yes.
Other questions? Comment?
My question would go back a couple slides on and this would probably be more for going back into historical reference when I was, and this is for the board, when I was reading through that, I guess there was a lot of things that were included within the ask back to the URD that seemed a lot of pad site preparation, maybe not. It seemed a little bit of a stretch on some of the things for public improvement, which is our directive as a URD. So the one thing I would like to do as a board before we move any further with this is to make sure that we go back and we take a hard look at when we've done maybe a like project for Parkside or something that's close and kind of do an apples for apples comparison on what we were putting in that's actually physical public improvement versus probably more development pad site work. That would be the one thing that I gleaned from reading through the presentation.
Tony,
I don't know if anybody else feels the same.
I agree. Would you go back to the other slide?
Ron, could you just back up a couple slides to the ask, Nick?
Next slide.
Next slide. There we go.
Yeah, and this is really where I guess my questions arise.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Danny?
on that point, because I think that's the way I tend to look at this, as not so much from the projected assessed value equation as from what should we be funding, because the assessed value, that's a risk that the developer bears, right? How much assessed value, how much increments created. We're not going to put this money out up front. We're going to reimburse the developer out of a certain percentage of the increment he creates. So if he doesn't create enough, that's sort of on the developer. So I look at this as, what of these elements have we typically funded and what should we fund on this one? And just to be specific, some things we can do, I think, inside the property lines in the nature of renovating a site so it's prepared to build and develop something that adds value, right? The retaining walls and the things that he has to do to sort of meet his specific development plans, that adds on a great deal to what happens inside the property lines. And a bunch of that I'm not very comfortable with. So when I look at this, and if you just look at the three project elements, existing property cleanup, I think the first two are fine, but the excavation and hauling of 150 and the grading site work of 45, I think come about because of the specific type of structures he wants to put there. He's got to do a lot of grading to build that retaining wall, et cetera. So in the Emma Avenue improvement section, that 8-inch water main that goes through the site, and he has to move that, is my understanding, because of how he wants to place his hotel. Understandable, but that's a cost, even though it's a city facility, that, another type of development that could also add increment wouldn't necessarily have to move to incur. Same true with the retaining wall. That's a big item. It's inside the property line, is my understanding. So that's an item, again, that's related to the specific hotel project. Then we had stormwater management, I think, is another issue that may come outside. That's really managing the stormwater off of the interior of the site. So I don't know if my math is correct. I'm not sure I added the 520. Without the 520, I think those are deducts from my sort of thinking of $555,000. It might be 575 if you add the 20.
Yeah, 575. Yeah.
Okay, so what I would suggest, I think that would get us to an approved reimbursement of $675,000. Is my math right? How was that? 700 or 680? Maybe 680.
Yeah.
680. Approved 680, the 1.255, and then it's also been typical for us to reimburse that at the rate of 75% of the increment realized, because we take some of that for administration and other benefit to the rest of the district. So that would be, for my proposal, is that we approve $680,000, subject to our typical verification of actual costs, reimbursed at 75% of the increment created.
Denny, some of them more recently we've been doing 73 because of the
arts. You're right. Yeah, that other 2% goes to fund our arts budget, so 73%. So I'd move that we approve this at 680 and reimbursed at 73% of the increment created, subject to cost validation.
Mr. Chairman, so Denny, is that 73% of the 680? Is that what you're
it's
talking?
73. So you take no, it is not. We'd approve 680 reimbursement, up to 680 reimbursement, but it's going to be reimbursed at the rate of 73% of the increment that comes in.
Annual basis.
Yeah, on an annual basis.
So he could get the whole 680
Possibly.
If there's time.
if it works out, yeah. I could see well, I'll second that for purposes of discussion. So we have a second. You made a motion, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Further discussion?
I could see maybe adding the water main in there. I could see where that could make sense. The other thing I was going to say is as far as the proposal we have up here, I personally have never thought it's going to generate enough increment to reach that before the district sunsets anyway. So even if we pass that as it sits right there, I don't think the developer would probably realize that much money. That's just a personal opinion.
I would, just having somewhat of a development background, I would agree with Denny on the water main movement. That would be something typically that's inside the property line of the development and would be the responsibility of the developer.
I've considered, maybe the city splits that, but really doesn't have to be moved in a lot of scenarios. It does in this one. To your other point, again, it's the risk of. I just think it's bad precedent for the board to be approving items that we wouldn't otherwise approve, just on the basis that the increment's never going to get there. Because I think you're setting a precedent now for the next project, maybe in a new urban allocation area for funding things like retaining walls on the inside. I just don't think it's a good precedent for us to do that, even though at the end of the day we're not going to have to probably pay for it because there's never going to get enough increment to touch it. I just don't think we should. I think we should look at the elements based upon whether they're appropriate elements.
I fully agree.
Well, the point I was coming from, and the water main, I'm okay either way. I'm just that's one I could, if we were trying to help as much as we could, I could see where that water main, you could make the case that water main could be moved. My only point in saying I don't personally think that he's going to realize that much increment is just the fact that if we don't approve this entire proposal, for instance, we approve the 680, I'm just saying, even if we approve the entire proposal, I don't think he'd realize that much anyway. So I think he's either way, he's going to realize somewhat less than what that proposal is laid out at that we're looking at up there.
Further discussion, questions? We do have a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair, I guess when let's say we would approve this 680, there's some work on the agency's part to put in that agreement together, so there would be an expenditure of agency funds. I would imagine Danielle's going to put the agreement together, so there's legal costs. Do we have an idea of what approximately those legal costs are to put a whole package like that together?
It's fairly inexpensive. From the legal and from my standpoint, it's probably $1,000 maybe. Welch Comer in the past has done the cost validation efforts, and they usually run $2,500 for the cost validation effort.
So it's $3,000 to $4,000.
Okay.
And that's part of, I think, what the 25% goes to help us recoup, too.
Further discussion? So we have it. Do you want to read the motion, please? So we're all.
Yeah, so motion by Davis to fund $680,000 of the requested $1,255,000 and set up metrics to reimburse that amount at 73% on an annual level. And then direct the executive director to prepare the necessary documents and engage the necessary third-party professional staff to validate the costs once the project is complete and go through the process.
Do you have what items that includes? Because I think it would be important to call out what items are included in that 680. I don't have that printout in front of me.
I probably would, in the motion, I'll probably put what is excluded.
Okay, just so we're clear on what items are included, because that'll be important for the IRA.
That will be included in the motion. So we will remove the excavation and hauling, grading and site work. So excavation and hauling at $150,000, grading and site work at $45,000, water main relocation, I think if the board is okay with that, at $95,000, retaining wall $265,000, and stormwater management at $20,000, which equates to the $680,000.
Correct.
I've got
Perfect.
that.
Everybody good? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
We can make it work.
The next item on my report is Executive Director Insurance Plan, and I think Commissioner Davis is going to kind of lead that conversation.
So when we approved Tony's compensation package, I think we all anticipated increased insurance costs of about $200 a month. That did not end up being the actual increase. It was more like, what, Tony, $28 a month or something? It was something similar to it. And in the meantime, Mayor Whitmer recognized the possibility of being able to affect some cost savings on the long-term disability policy that we provided for Tony by putting him on the city's plan. There had been an issue before about not being able to do that, but the mayor's helped work through that, so we're now able to put Tony on the city's disability plan, and that affects a cost savings. I forgot the number, Tony.
It's $120 a month.
So that saves us $120 a month. So Steve and I talking, we thought it would be fair to apply that cost savings over to paying a portion of Tony's dependent insurance premium. So that I would make that motion that we do that.
Second.
That's for this year.
Correct. I mean, as the contract goes, we review compensation and benefits each year. So that we'd go back and make that retroactive also to whenever that savings got actually implemented. I don't know what that date is.
When the savings got in November 1st.
Okay.
It looks like November 1st, right?
Good. Motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks. Motion carries.
And the final issue I have for initiative update, Mr. Chairman, is just on the Modern Theater. I received a letter this afternoon, just before the board meeting, that I emailed out to you. I'm not sure if all of you have seen it or not, but it was a letter from the chairman of the Modern Theater Board sharing that they truly appreciate the agency's interest in partnering with the theater on this Performing Arts Center. But they're a little challenged by the aggressiveness of the suggested MOU, and they were hoping that the agency would step up with funding to kind of help kickstart their funding effort. They really appreciate the potential of keeping the land assets in place so that they can fundraise over time, but they were really hoping that basically the agency would kick in some cash to kind of help start their fundraising efforts. And our commitment would be to kind of help with site improvements, demolition, and other quantifiable metrics that they could share with their potential donors that the agency/city is really stepping up and putting something tangible on the table. I think I summarized it fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
did they discuss any partnerships with other performing arts?
They are aware of that through Commissioner Metz's coaching. I've asked Coeur d'Alene 2030 to kind of see if they could be an organization that could reach out to the other, I guess, cultural arts entities in the community to see if they could maybe combine their effort in fundraising and work with the Modern Theater for this Performing Arts Center. The Modern Theater is very receptive to that. And the leadership of Coeur d'Alene 2030 is looking to kind of be that bridge and kind of coalesce that energy to see if they could bring more energy to the table on that front. So very nascent effort right now. I understand that the Summer Theater is interested in that conversation. I'm not sure what other entities might be, but there's going to be an effort to kind of see if there could be some energy coalesced on that front. I'm not sure how they would all kind of go shoulder to shoulder on the fundraising effort. It's a large task, as you recall. It's like $10 to $12 million in a short amount of time.
Mr. Chairman.
Correct.
I guess I look at that project and I look at other fundraising projects in the community, and $10 to $12 million is just gigantic. And I don't know if the ask of us to be the initial donors is really the route to go. I would have hoped that they would have come to us and says, gosh, you know what, we've got a big donor that's going to commit $1 million or $2 million. Then that could kind of spark your interest. Okay, well, we've got some momentum here. But for their first ask to be of us to donate that for really a gigantic project. I know a lot of you are involved with the Kroc Center project, which is one of maybe the largest project in Coeur d'Alene that was done, and that was a major push, and it was accomplished, but that was like a $7 million. Now, I know there's some other things involved. There's some grants and some other things, too, that they're proposing, but it just seems like just a monumental task to me in really a short window for us, the Urban Renewal Agency, to affect some change in Midtown. So that's my concern.
She did express her understanding of our timeline and stuff, but
I agree. I'm just wondering how the $12 million comes about. I don't know the full details on the breakdown, but $12 million seems like.
She probably didn't see that. Did anybody want to copy that letter before I asked her?
I wasn't able to print mine, actually.
I couldn't open my attachment, but if you don't have enough copies, it's fine. It's not a big deal.
I have one.
Yeah, we
too.
can share.
Because you said the Kroc Center was $7 million.
Oh, I got my own.
Deanna, do you remember what the Kroc Center was raised in the community? Wasn't that $7
I thought it
million
was
is what we had to
$5.
raise?
$70 million is what the total cost was.
Well, that was the
We
total,
raised
but I
about
think
$8 million in the community, and it was a lot of,
That was a monumental effort.
yeah, it was a major effort to raise $8 million to match that initial.
Yeah, and maybe if we had a roadmap of how they thought they were going to get there,
Yeah.
but we don't really even have a roadmap.
you didn't offer any of that.
Yeah, I think this would be wonderful in Midtown, but I'm not sure how we get there.
So to address Commissioner Met's question, their original overture to us, and I'm going a little bit from memory here, it was several months ago where they made the presentation, they were looking at a $11 million performing arts endeavor, and then the 12 million got into the mix, the extra million with potential land purchases up there in Midtown.
Okay.
So that's kind of how the breakdown is.
Danny?
Mr. Chairman, so, yeah, I agree with the mayor that, it's going to be a really huge pull, and you almost need a white knight to come in and say, this is the great project, I'm going to fund half of it or something or more. But I don't know if it makes any sense to keep the thing going, but if it does it sounds like in part what they're asking for is to be able to say, we have a commitment from the Urban Renewal Agency that if we can get this money raised, they will fund certain of the infrastructure elements of this. And theoretically, we could go through and with some assumptions, come up with a sort of a pro forma of what we could do if they had the funding to do the project, whether it's streetscape, utilities, parking improvements, site cleanup, things like we would do on any other typical project. We could probably come up with, on paper, with the number that sort of like we've done for some of the tax credit housing projects. We're willing to fund this roughly, at roughly a certain amount to throw in. If it gets put together with a lot of ifs in there, we could, I think, consider doing something like that. They do sort of imply that they need land costs reduced. And maybe there's even a way to do that if we wanted to. I don't know if we do. But, we could probably at least come up with on paper, this is the kind of money that you could rely on if you were able to make your fundraising goal. And maybe that's enough for them to at least go and say, we've got a commitment for this to get them started.
The only challenge I think I can do, and I can appreciate what you're suggesting, the only challenging would be the parking element. I think they had, from the presentation they made, they had a grander parking solution up there that...
Structured parking?
Well, it's just, as I recall, they had potential acquisitions of houses nearby and parcels nearby that they were going to level and turn into surface parking. So that's a very dynamic and challenging element to this whole thing. How are they going to park it? The rest of what you suggested, Commissioner Davis, I think is very doable. The parking element is a challenge.
Mr. Chairman, also the housing company is a player in this too, right? So is the housing company willing to basically go along with their time frame too? Have they given the nod that they'll extend out the time frame of the ownership in there, what they have there?
Based on the MOU time frame, yes, they're willing to do that.
The housing company is willing to.
Yeah.
They mentioned that they would do a reduced cost of their chunk of dirt there?
They were looking more at fair market value at the time of whenever those acquisitions would occur.
The parking issue, though, is big. I mean, you're right, Tony. They had a bigger footprint of parking, and that involved other parcels in that area that aren't owned right now. Some may be not even for sale, right? I know that there's one home there that's for sale, but it's not contiguous to the parking lot. So there's a lot of questions there.
As I recall, there was some suggestion they might work a deal with, is it the Lutheran Church has a surface parking lot that might be available. But, churches use parking lots at night too, so yeah, it's a challenge.
You could do valet and then ship them down to the parking structure.
To our new structure.
Yeah, down to Coeur d'Alene Avenue.
Yep.
Okay, what's
So
next?
what would the board like me to do on this front?
I don't think we can take action on this because it wasn't clearly agendized. I mean, you could get a feeling from the board, but...
Okay. I wouldn't want to go any further than what Denny suggested as far as, I don't know, as far as a monetary donation from the board, I don't think so. I'm not supportive of that. But I think if we could get consensus and a clear messaging on the original MOU of we could potentially do if they did that, then raise the money, I'd be comfortable with that, but that's about it.
Deanna?
I was just trying to remember the initial presentation, but as I recall, the Modern Theater was looking at us providing the land as well as the additional land for parking. Don't you remember that was what they talked about initially?
Well, they wanted the entire footprint, the property
entire
that we
footprint.
own, plus what the
Plus
housing company.
The housing companies, yeah.
That's
As I
correct.
recall,
Yeah.
that was the initial.
I don't think they were asking us to go buy additional land, though, were they?
Pardon?
No,
They weren't asking us to go buy additional land for parking.
I don't recall that. I recall it was the land we had.
Right.
Oh, they also, well, maybe
They did show us some schematics that involved additional lots, but I don't think
There
they
was three
asked us
houses
to
on the south
buy
end
them.
on the Third Street side there, yeah. So do we want Tony to just put some rough numbers together and bring it back as an agenda
Well,
item
that's
then?
the other challenge, is because typically we've had people come to us with numbers, so the theater board probably doesn't have the expertise to come up with those numbers.
They could probably, they have an architect that has put together the plan center. I'm sure they have the capacity to come up with that.
What if we
I'll
went back to
pursue
them
that.
and just say, well, quantify what you're talking about
I'll pursue
infrastructure?
that, yeah.
And bring it back next month? Because, yeah, with our limited time, we need to move.
Yeah.
Anything else, Tony?
That is it, Mr. Chairman.
At this time, it's for board commissioner comments. Any comments? And now the public comment period, second one. Any public comment? Seeing none, we have an executive session, Idaho Code Section 74-206.
Subsection 1, subsection C.
C, right, 1C.
Don't have the right
I'll entertain a motion.
subsection.
I move for that.
Seconded to enter executive session code 74-206 subsection 1C.
As written.
To acquire an interest in real property which is not owned by a public agency.
Any further discussion?
Goodlander. Goodlander.
Yes.
Roll call. Metz.
Yes.
Harmon.
Yes.
Whitmire.
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
Davis.
Aye.
Gruffel.
Aye.
Hoskins.
Yes.
You want this? Okay, I have it.
How about you need it?
No, I mean, I
That modern theater.